for me.
So we'll give Mike a couple more minutes and then we'll get started if he doesn't show up and he can catch up.
I still haven't gotten to the last one. Oh, yeah. It's just, it dropped very low on my list of things.
Well, whenever you're ready, you organize it, so it's beautiful, and fabulous, and super easy.
Well, should we go ahead and get started and Mike can get going? So, all right, we'll go to the order. The Finance Committee of February 3rd, any changes to the agenda? All right. Go ahead and get started with the review of the preliminary Q4 2024 financial report. Kind of highlights, sales tax revenue through November is up 6.2% compared to 2023. That's budgeted at 7.5, but there's a little bit different there because our budget, our actual 2023 came in a little bit higher. So we're looking to hopefully be right at budget, if not a little bit above in 2024. We get sales tax kind of a month and a half in arrears, so we'll get that here next week. December will come about February 9th or 10th. Still working through the rebuilds, up to 270 COs, 310 permits pulled. Still working with FEMA and state of Colorado to get, projects completed and payments back. We're continuing, Allison and her staff is working hard on that. To date, we've gotten $3.4 million from FEMA, and we've gotten all of our insurance, which is about $2 million. Still continuing to work through some of the bigger projects. We've substantially completed Big and Little Sagamore and Children's Park, big projects that everybody was looking forward to. The Mine Camp House is done, and then we'll work on the Sagamore asphalt paving when a lot more of that rebuild's done. That's budgeted for 2025.
I have a question.
And it's fine if you don't. I need to use this, right? So people can hear?
Yes.
Okay. It's okay if you don't have an answer for this because it's maybe more obscure, but the $2 million that came from the insurance, do you know how much, were there denials for things? Like how much was claimed overall, or is that just what we've received?
That's what we received, and that's what we had insured. There were, like Big and Little Sagamore didn't have insurance on them because they came from the developer and they just didn't ever get insured. Little things like that.
Yeah.
But there were a lot more expenses than that $2 million because, fences, and there are a lot of
Yeah.
things that aren't even insurable.
Okay.
So yeah, we
Okay.
missed out on, or not
Interesting.
missed out,
Yeah,
but there
yeah.
were a lot of expenses that we had that we're hoping to get back from FEMA.
Yeah.
as part of those projects.
Well, this was unprecedented. I mean, nobody was expecting this, so how we did things and how we do them now are certainly different, so thanks.
Yes. So, yep. The rest of the revenues are, pretty much at budget. We've done some budget amendments for the ones that weren't. The big one was the open space with that purchase that was made in the first quarter of 2024. General overview, general fund revenues overall up about 1.9%. Most of that being from property tax revenue increases, and then the offset of that being use tax and license and permits that were down in 2024. A lot of that being rebuilds and downtown Superior development. Water up about 21.9%, from 2023. A lot of that was system development fees for downtown Superior, and then higher water usage in 2024. We're still on the first page.
Jeff, I can't remember where I pulled this from, so maybe it's later, or maybe we're talking about it now, but that water fund grant that we didn't get, is that being awarded later, or did we just not get that at all?
We'll continue to apply for that. It's kind of a ongoing. So yeah, Brandon and his staff continue to apply for that, and hopefully when we get that, we will be able to do that. So yeah, that's where we're at there.
Thank you.
Expenses, general fund is up about 2.2%, higher public safety, library, and legal services costs in 2024. Water was down about 17.6%. Majority of that is large capital projects finished in 2023. The biggest one of those being the granulated activated carbon system. So general fund is at, budget expectations. The graph will show sales tax revenues. We're up 2.1% through November. As we stated earlier, we'll continue to watch that, and we watch that a lot. There were some adjustments from one of our big retailers in 2023 that skewed some of the numbers in 2024. So that 6.2 is probably about 2% up if we kind of went apples to apples without any adjustments. General fund revenue graph, sales and use tax is pretty much flat. Again, as we talked about, property tax is up quite a bit because of the increase in mill levy as well as property valuations. You can see the licenses and permits were down. Charges for services up a little bit. And then the big one down is miscellaneous. That's really from some of the fire reimbursements we got in 2023 for community foundation grants, damaged meters that the contractor reimbursed us, and then PPDR payment from Boulder County. So that was about $662,000 in 2023 that, of course, we didn't get in 2024. General fund expenses, pretty much in line, up 2.2% overall. Some ups and downs, clerk a little bit higher. We changed the allocation, and then we had, higher election costs with the presidential election. Admin looks a little bit higher, but we moved a couple positions out of finance into admin. So that was part of that. Same thing with finance, lower because of those changes. And we also changed from one full-time UB clerk to 2 part-time clerks in 2024. Communications is a new department in 2024, kind of different expenses. A lot of it came from admin. Some of them came from Parks and Rec and a few other places, but that's what that one came from. Legal is up because of the special counsel regarding airport noise. Public safety is up in 2024 compared to 2023. A lot of that was because they just couldn't get fully staffed in 2023. So we had what I would call savings, but unfilled positions in 2023. Parks and Rec, higher, but still within budget. And then 2024, Public Works salaries were higher because we added a couple new employees. And then the non-departmental, We had higher STC, Superior Town Center reimbursements with the developer, as well as some FEMA expenses for Parks and Rec, and then we actually had a higher transfer to CIP because we transfer additional money out of general fund into CIP. So that's kind of the big expenses, revenues and expenses for the year. Next one are the capital improvement program projects. I'm not going to hit every one of these. I'll just kind of hit a few of them.
I have a question. Do you prefer I save questions, or do you
Nope.
want me to just
Throw 'em
shoot
out.
whenever they're?
Yep.
So on the last one, on the communications, so I know it's a new department essentially. Is that all the stand-up cost for something like that, or did it come because somebody was doing it before it was
Correct. So,
established,
yeah, a
right?
lot
So
of
did
it
it get
came-
pulled from?
A lot of it came from other departments.
Okay.
So from
Okay.
admin and, even some non-departmental. So, I mean, it includes the salaries, the benefits, website design, professional services. So for Hello Superior, those costs
Yeah.
are in there. Printing and binding, postage, and some of their memberships. So that's kind of where all that comes from. So yeah, it came from other places, and then there were a few ads as we added that, Hello Superior and
Yeah,
some of those other
yeah.
things that were added on.
And is the 2.2%, 2%, is there an average for over the last decade what that number looks like? Is that just typical of, Or is it sometimes
varies.
up, sometimes
Yeah,
down?
it varies every year. It usually always goes up. It just depends on what the board wants to do. If we add staff or add new programs, then of course it's going to go up more than that. I mean, if you go back before we added the community center and some of those other downtown programs, then it would have been, much lower. And when you saw those years, then they would have been bigger increases.
is there any number in that percentage variance that would be alarming? Or is that
No,
not how that?
I mean, it's one of those, we try to watch it compared to the budget, and that's really what we're looking at is what's the budget saying and trying to stay on that. And then we have things that come up that we just try to figure out what's the best way to fit them in, and does that mean moving money around or, cutting other projects? Okay. Yeah, so projects, a lot of these first three, the fence maintenance, irrigation upgrades, and tree and plant and shrub enhancements are all kind of yearly projects that just have to be done. So even though they may not have final cost, they will here before we do the audit when we close the books next week. Some vehicles.
That fence maintenance, I'm assuming that's not the Rock Creek, right? That's town-owned
That's
fences?
town-owned
and-
right now.
Okay.
Correct,
Just want
yes.
to make sure.
Yep. Community center building improvements, structural, drainage repairs, some of those little things, a little bit over budget for a new book locker. Then we've started the design on the operations building. Playground update isn't quite done yet, but you can see it was, as you all were aware, well over budget, because of the projects that came in, and those were approved. So we'll get final costs here and wrap those up as well. Same thing with the xeriscaping project. That was part of the street project. Park improvements for the shrub beds, same thing, kind of a yearly thing that we're doing to improve those and continue to make those better. Shade structures for STC parcels 1 and 2.
I appreciate it. Big tip.
Dog park renovations will be done. Some of the other ones, the general improvements for park improvements, those just are improvements around town. The rest of those on page 9, are still ongoing. You can see they're expecting to spend most of it. The bridge rail painting came in a little bit over budget, as well as the office renovation. And then the wayfinding one at the bottom, that was kind of a carryover from 2023 that we had CDOT grant for. So that's kind of why that one kind of lingered into 2024.
Is that
is that the like park committee, like those are for trails and
Yeah.
things, right? And the parks committee,
Yes.
park, okay.
Yep. Street replacement program, the main part of that was done in 2024 at about 2.9 million, but the board gave Brandon to do the couple of original town alleys that will get started here in 2025, so that'll be a little bit of carryover. The rest of the public works projects kind of got done, some a little bit above budget, some under budget. Same thing with the rest of those projects. Next one, kind of the next to last one, the downtown Superior Civic Space, that had an $800,000 budget. And then it's got 600 budgeted in 2024 or 2025, so that'll get carried over and completed in 2025. Same thing with the comp plan. It was budgeted 150. We expected to spend about 75 in 2024 when we did the budget. We rebudgeted 2025 or 225,000 in 2025. And the reason that went up is the planning department was able to get a grant for about $150,000. So we added the traffic plan. So that project will both be coming to the board or the council. I'm still not getting it. So that's where we're at there. The next fund, Conservation Trust, that is a little bit of both. That comes from lottery money from the state, and we can only do parks projects with that. So we do pool improvements and then tree, plant, and shrub. And we kind of, use those as is. Class 1 landscape, revenues are at budget as well as expenses are at budget. Open space is a 0.3 dedicated sales tax. The first portion of that sales tax gets dedicated to the debt service on that debt service side of that fund. And then once the debt has been paid off for that year, then we can use that money to do projects.
Jeff, the debt service on that, is there any debt besides Coyote Ridge? Are there other parcels that we've purchased that have debt against them? That might be in the Budget 101, I can't remember.
We had there is outstanding debt, 06. So we issued debt in 06. That will then get paid off in 2027 or 2026, 20-year debt. And then Coyote Ridge's principal will start getting reduced then. Right now, all we're paying on Coyote Ridge is interest.
Okay.
So-
And is the collateral for those loans, is it the parcels or is that, I wanted to say I remembered part of that being against the community center, but I might remember.
That's not against community center. It's more of the parcels and just kind of town revenues.
Okay.
The dedicated sales tax.
Got it, thank you.
Yep. So yeah, the open space, like we said, revenues and expenditures are at kind of budget or below, the projects. Park and wayfinding for Coyote Ridge Trail is in design. That'll get carried over to 2025, as well as the open space master plan or management plan and the master plan implementation will kind of get carried over into 2025 as the OSAC and board, the council decide on what they want to do with those, and we'll bring those back. Then the open space debt service fund was an 06 debt issue that we refunded in 2015. That'll go through 2026. And then the Coyote Ridge principal starts in 2027 to get paid off in 2040. Trash and recycling fund is just a pass through. We bill what we get billed for the service that is provided. Marshall Fire Recovery Fund, that's a 0.16 dedicated sales tax. That will expire in 2032. The way we use that now is we transfer that into CIP fund to support the recovery projects for that. Superior Urban Renewal Authority for the downtown Superior, that is tax increment financing, property tax that all gets sent to the town and then by the revenue share agreement gets divvied up between the developer the metro districts, and then the entities that have increased their mill levies from 2013 to current, they get that money back. And so you can see in 2024, Mountain View Fire will receive about $224,000, Louisville Fire about $54,000, BVSD about $89,000, and Town of Superior $152,000. Boulder County's not on there because they actually dropped their mill levy in 2024. And so it's below what it was in 2013. And so that's why they do not get a payment.
Jeff, quick question, and I apologize for being late.
Problem.
If at some point in the future, we're able to renegotiate the IGA with Louisville regarding this split, that would be nothing but an upside for Superior, correct? Potentially.
This isn't part of the revenue,
Okay.
revenue share
Okay.
agreement. This is directly, this is what they call urban renewal. So it was all the areas that downtown Superior were part of. What a tax increment financing and an urban renewal authority does is they collect all the property taxes. So everybody's property tax, they say, hey, all that increment above where it was year one gets collected and realistically goes back to pay off the debt for the developer for all the infrastructure that goes in. So this portion would not be part of that renegotiation, but that's a good question. Yep, so. Next fund is Superior McCaslin Interchange Metropolitan District. This is really for the interchange, which is now the DDI. But this was approved, and it's really for the marketplace and then Discovery Office. And it used to have a sales tax that expired and really got repurposed into the Marshall Fire. And so all of that maintenance and improvements is paid for by the property tax that come from that district. That district also has a debt service piece, and that debt service piece will go away here. We've paid it off in 2024, and so that will remove that debt, and that fund will go away. We repurposed some of that mill levy for operations, but that did lower their mill levy a little bit for this current year for 2025. Utilities, there was rate increases in 2024. You can see the water revenues are up about 25.1% for charges for services, which includes, water, potable water for houses as well as irrigation. And that was just because of a much warmer summer. And then in 2023, we had a very wet spring and early summer. And then, of course, we had a 7.5% rate increase. The miscellaneous revenue is system development fees or system connection fees. And those were up in 2024 for new development in downtown Superior. Water expenses in 2024, admin is admin and kind of stays the same. Water supply, a little bit lower, and we'll get into this a little bit more in Budget 101, but there's a lot of expenses we have that come from Northern Water, who we are a part of, that is a big, they have a lot of the expenses, so they kind of keep those and then pass those along. So there were lower Southwestern water supply pipeline cost, but then there were higher Windy Gap carriage and power expenses. And those Windy Gap carriage and power expenses will probably in 2026 through 2028 or 2029, depending on what the weather is, will go up. I've got a meeting tomorrow morning with them and all the participants, because we've got to find a way to fill Chimney Hollow. And so the only way to do that is to pump the water there. So there will be some higher expenses there once that reservoir is completed.
Is that going to be like a short-term kind of higher expense while they pump the water and then it regulates, or is that kind of?
Should be, yes, that's what we're hoping for. And then there will, of course, there will be more expenses with the new reservoir, but those have we've got some of them in the budget. We're hoping to get, dialed in better with them on what those expenses are going to be going into the future, because it definitely has a material impact on our rates of, we met with them earlier this year or last year and, said, hey, a 1% rate increase for us only brings in $30,000. So all of a sudden, when you're talking $100,000, that's a 3.5% rate increase for us. So they were a little bit surprised to that. And now some of the bigger ones, Broomfield and those are starting to ask some questions. So, but again, it's one of those that we need the water, costs are going up, and, it is what it is. So we'll continue to work on it and fine tune it and keep it as low as we can.
Awesome, thank you.
Yep. All right, move on to the debt service side of water. And again, that's because water is an enterprise, it does its own thing. And so we have debt in there. That debt will get paid off in 2025. We structured that back in 2006 and then refunded it in 2016 to reduce it. But there's a kind of a balloon payment here in 2025 to pay that off, as we knew we'd have system development fees coming in, and we've got the cash to actually pay that off for water, sewer, and storm. So that will get paid off here in 2025. And then that debt will go away. But then, of course, our payment with Northern Water continues to go up. So it's not like we're going to free up a lot of water or a lot of money in that water fund. The sewer operations has an additional loan for wastewater treatment plant improvements. That loan runs through 2049. The utility capital water projects are here. I'm not going to hit all of them. Big one there, the second one, the UV disinfection system. That was a big project overall. Started at a $1.8 million budget in 2021, kind of got delayed. Final cost came in at about 1.1 million as we finished that in 2024. Some of these other ones are just replacement of old equipment that, is 25 plus years old that just needs to be done. The last one there on this page is the smart meters, as we talked about. We didn't get the grant. They resubmitted a grant in Q4 of 2024 for hopefully a possible award in 2025. Some of these next projects, and if you've got questions, let me know, but the water main transmission line, that's an upsize that will hopefully get done here in 2025. Water pump station upgrades as needed for pump replacements, that's in planning stages. Sludge drying beds, that's going through the EPA right now to kind of work on that. We did the construction of the liner and sludge pumping station, started that in 2024, and we'll continue to work on that. Potable irrigation and valve installation, that's kind of a ongoing project to kind of install isolation valves. Because when this was first put in, there was a lot of the irrigation that was one big loop. So if you turned off one spot, it turned off everything. So they're going in and putting places where they can isolate. So that's kind of what this project's been since 2017. Fire hydrant replacements, kind of just as needed. Same thing with the chemical pump replacement. That's really all those. The next page, you
I
can
have
see.
a question.
Yep.
Sorry. Is the fire hydrant replacement like a standing annual thing, or is that any like leftovers from the fire?
No, that's just a
It's just-
standing if something
okay.
needs to get replaced or repaired. Yeah. The next big one, that Windy Gap firming, this is just our, cost of being in Windy Gap for the operations of Carter Lake, as well as, it will be part of our debt payment for the debt service on Chimney Hollow, because Northern Water they've issued the debt. We just are we get our allocation through an assessment, and we'll pay that every year. Sewer projects, master plan. will carry into 2025. They do a systematic collection of video to see the lines. We're waiting on that final invoice. Big project is the sludge dewatering. That project started in 2024. The equipment's on site. That'll carry into 2025. Then the last one there, the biological nutrient removal, that will get carried into 2025. That's the big project that we're using our ARPA money for. So that's where so that $3 million is really pretty much coming from the feds on that. So
That's what the
There-
reason.
I was going to say, are we still have a level of certainty about that funding at this point?
we've already gotten that.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So check has been deposited?
Yeah, the
Okay.
check was deposited during that project, and we had to, that's why in the December 7th meeting, you guys had to approve that one contract, because we had to obligate it by December 31 of 2024, and it has to be spent by December of 2026. So, yeah. Yeah, we do not want to return that money, so. And then there's the rest of the sewer projects as well as a couple storm projects. So that's the capital projects for the enterprise funds. The next pages are just the financial report in more detail on the number side. I usually don't go over these in detail unless you guys have any questions. I'll hit some of the highlights. Library was up because of mill levies being up. The rest of those changes we talked about in the general fund.
Hey, Jeff, I know it's partially in this. I added up our office space was 289.5 from this, and then in budget 101 it was 268, but that seems really low. Do you know what our total, what we're leasing as far as what we're paying for leases on office space for staff?
I do not know that,
Okay, no worries.
so.
And the numbers that are reflected here, is that accounting for all the accruals for 2024?
No,
Okay. So there'll be another true-up probably.
correct. We closed the books. Valerie and Kim and Linda, our accounting technicians, invoices have to be due on tomorrow.
Okay.
And then we'll close the books when we do checks on Thursday. So yes, these aren't, that's why it says preliminary. These aren't completely final. And the reason for that is we leave it open, one, because you don't get invoices, but two, we don't get our sales tax until next week anyways.
Okay.
For December. So yes, there are still some trickling in, but this is the majority.
And then as far as these expenditures go, have we looked at like a year over year of where we're spending money within the operational budget and where we're not spending money? And have we had any conversations about making adjustments to right-size budgets?
We do that every year during the budget, because the staff, the departments will get, we end up having what they think the estimates are going to be for the year. We talk through all those, and we have, 7 or 8 years of prior year actuals that we compare to and say, okay, does this look right, and what's coming forward? Now, we always have changes and things that come up, but yeah, we try to do that and keep it so that all of a sudden we don't say, oh, this line stays at $100,000 every year, even though you spend 10. No, we look at it and try to dial
Make
it.
adjustments. Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Yep. Again, capital improvement program, those are in total, and we went through most of those projects, so I'm not going to hit any of those. Same thing with Conservation Trust. Same thing with Class 1 Landscape. It's kind of right on top of budget. Same thing with Open Space. This is kind of the leftover money after the debt has been paid. And so that's kind of what that fund is, as well as the debt service. You can see we kind of take it right to the budget and only use what we need to pay off the debt service, and then move it all into the capital side so that can be used for either future purchases or just maintenance. Trash and recycling, the same thing. You can see the urban renewal, where all that money gets split. A big portion of it goes to the developer, and then there's that pieces that we talked about being split on those additional mill levies. Interchange district, there's the taxes as well as what the maintenance and administration of that is, as well as then the debt service, and that will then go away here in 2024. Same thing, Marshall Fire Recovery, we'll make that journal entry to CIP fund here when we close the books, and that, it looks like we didn't get to budget on taxes, but the way we do budgeting is if you go over your expenditures, then you're not within state law. So we make sure we have a little bit of fluff in something like this. And so that's kind of why that one looks that way. Is same way with the Urban Renewal Authority. You'll see when we did that budget amendment in November or October, we add a little bit more just in case something happens. And this year was a little bit different in the fact that there were property owners that fought their property taxes late and actually got refunds. So we actually owe the county money here in 2025 to pay them back for that. So a little bit interesting, so. Yeah.
It's been a long time to process that,
Yeah. So,
because everybody did it.
yeah.
Instant denial, yes.
Yep. And then the next one is the water and sewer, kind of overall, you can see the revenues and then the way the expenses split out. Pretty much most of them are right, close to budget. The capital projects, that was just projects that kind of got pushed that we talked about. Same thing with sewer. Water's a little bit different because we don't know year to year, month to month, what the people are going to use. Sewer is set, so that's a little bit easier to kind of look at and say, okay, what's going on? That capital project year to date isn't near the budget because that project we talked about with the ARPA money got pushed, waiting to get that contract in, so that'll get carried over into 2025. Storm drainage, same thing, kind of know what's coming in unless we get grants. And then there are the expenses, nothing really, to really look at. Capital projects were down this year just because we didn't have anything, planned. Then the last page is the investment portfolio summary of kind of what we have overall in cash and kind of where we are with our interest rates.
Jeff, on the investments, and you might not know this offhand, so I apologize, I should have sent this to you, but are we in investment vehicles that protect the principal, like index accounts or something where we don't risk losing principal?
Yes, we are either in the bank, which banks in Colorado have coverage. So whatever we have in, they have to have 110% of our deposits. And then we're in the, what they call LGIPs, or the government investment pools in the state. And then we are in some treasuries, or more treasuries, a few agencies, but everything is backed by the government. So we have nothing in investments, pools or any index funds or anything. It's all strictly based on state statute. So we are very by the book and can't really do that because, what we always talk about in governmental finance is your number one is safety and then yield. Well, it's really safety, liquidity, and then yield because you need the money when you need it. So yes, we are definitely very safe.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep. So that is the quarterly report. The next is the, big full set of financials. I don't know if you want to go through this, if you have questions on this, because it's pretty much just more detail of the first one. So whatever you guys want to do.
Questions, but I think you've answered them.
Okay.
It's not, the hearing is not closed out yet, so.
Correct. Yes. So,
I think if there's any questions from the budget 101, then maybe go back to it, but I don't need to. Yeah.
okay. Sounds good.
I guess my only question would be, with the general sales tax, it's shown that we're under by about 275,000. What's, realizing that the year is not closed out yet, and hopefully the holiday shopping in Superior is going to boost that number, but what were some of the key drivers you think?
The biggest thing in that is we don't have 12 months.
Okay.
Because we're kind of 45 days behind. So we will get December in February, 10th? You know, kind of how that, with the way the weekend falls. So yes, if you look at that first page 4 on this, quarterly report, you'll see that in December, there's still 0 down there. And so we will get another, million plus, that will make that to where we're actually above budget. Yes, exactly. So yes, that's a good question. So yeah, if you have any other questions on the financials, we can come back to those, but we'll move on to Budget 101. And again, this will get presented at the work session on the 3rd. So if you got questions or want clarification, I can hopefully get them there. But Matt wanted us to go over this with you guys to kind of let you guys look at it and see what we think. Yeah, so. And I'm going to try to go through this as quick as you want me to. I know on March 3rd, you guys are going to have a pretty packed agenda, so I'm not going to want to go for 45 minutes. So I'm going to try to go through this quick. But if you have questions, stop me, and then we can go from there. All right, so the town funds, a fund is used to segregate resources and expenditures of different types. The town uses 5 governmental fund types, the first one being the general fund. That's used for the main operations of kind of the town. The town then has 2 capital project funds. That's used to track financial sources used to acquire and construct capital assets. We've had the one CIP for years that has a 0.3 sales tax. And then the one that just got approved here in 2024 that went into effect in 2025. We've got 7 special revenue funds. Those are used to track specific financial resources from a specific tax or other purpose. Enterprise funds are run like a business, and those are the ones we just talked about, water, sewer, and storm. We've got 3 of those, but for budget purposes, we have 6. And what we do there is we do operations side and capital side. So we do budgets, both of them, but when it comes to the year end, it gets rolled into one fund for each of them. And then we've got 1 debt service fund, which is the open space debt service. That will then go to 2 here when we issue the CIP debt for the new sales tax. So breaking those down then, the general fund, sorry.
So Jeff, we have 10 different budgets within these 5 funds?
We've got 14 different funds and 17 budgets.
That seems like a lot, at least for somebody that's not in this every single day. How does that compare to some of our neighbors? Are we?
It's probably about the same.
Really?
Even though we're small, size-wise, we do pretty much exactly what Louisville does, what Boulder does, what Broomfield, now Broomfield's a county, so not really, but where I live in Thornton, it's just the number size. We do pretty much the same stuff, it's just in a smaller quantity. So, but yes, it's one of those things of, when you're talking about how do we break this down and make this more, manageable.
Streamlined and simple.
It's tough to do because, like sales tax is 3.775. That goes to the general fund, goes now to 2 CIP funds, goes to the open space fund, goes to the Marshall Fire Recovery Fund. So there's 5 funds that get sales tax. Same thing with property tax. SMED gets it, town gets it. So there's library then has a piece into that. So yes, it is confusing and trying to put every hat on, but that's why it's just one of those where people can say, where's our lottery money going? we've got that pot of money sitting here.
Okay.
So, yeah,
Right.
good question. So, yeah, so for the first one, the general fund, which is the biggest, total revenues, and these are all 2025 budget numbers, 23.5 million. Of that, 19.4 is from taxes. Then breaking the taxes down, 4.2 is budgeted for property tax, 12 million for sales tax, 1.1 for building use tax, 1.25 million for vehicle use, and then we have what they call franchise and other taxes of 860. That includes your XL franchise, so kind of your franchise fee for XL to be our provider. We get about $400,000 from them. Comcast franchise fee, as people are cutting cord, that keeps getting lower, but that's about $110,000. And then this is also where the highway users tax comes in, and that's a little bit over $300,000.
So Jeff, just going back to the number of accounts that you manage for the March 3rd, it might be, I think, really powerful to share that top level number. Like, this is the number of different budgets that we have to manage. Because looking through all of this information, that's not clear. And
Okay.
I think it provides a real perspective on the level of responsibility that you and your team have for tracking every single penny that comes in and out of the town.
I can do that. So yeah, I'll add it to that.
Yeah, and as we think about how we present this to the public, sharing that top level number, I think also gives residents an idea of, oh, there's a lot of moving parts here. It's not just, oh, we want money for parks. We want more money for roads. Well, here's the universe of things that we're looking at.
Okay.
And why it needs to be segregated, which, you mentioned as well, but just so the public knows, like, open space funds has to go to open space. So,
Correct.
you can't be putting that into playgrounds or that,
And
just so
that's
they
the biggest
know.
thing of why we have 17 funds, because it's, what I like to call different silos of money.
Yeah.
That is all that can go in that silo.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, okay.
Question on the franchise fees, and this is just more a curiosity than anything, but things like Excel as a provider, I'm assuming if they're paying a franchise fee, then they kind of have exclusivity with that. So we can't have Excel and say United Power or something like that. It has to be just one provider.
Usually, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Do they bid on that at all? Or is it just, it is what it is, it's been around
It
forever?
usually is what it is.
Okay.
I mean, there's very, that, and, there's usually one provider in an area.
Okay.
And that's really about it.
That makes
So,
sense. Sorry, I was just curious.
Yep. License permit budgeted about 1.3 million, and most of that is building permits and permit and plan check review fees. And then on the flip side of that, and we'll get to this, but just to let you know, of that 1.25 million, 53% of it goes to Safe Built, because they're kind of our internal, inspectors and stuff like that.
I have a question about that. They were brought on for the fire, right? Or were they always,
They were coming on, we were changing contractors at the end of that year. So yes, day one on the job was right after the fire.
I didn't understand that. So I think I thought that they would phase out, but no.
No.
Okay.
Nope. So, next set of general fund revenues is charges for services. Biggest portion of that is admin fee, and what we do there is it's a allocation of staff time that goes to some of the other funds that then gets allocated back to the general fund, paid back from those others. To about $205,000 of recreation fees and about $85,000 worth of facility use fees. Around $150,000 worth of court fines, which is mostly speeding tickets. Then we have miscellaneous revenues of, the biggest two being interest income, and then for 2025, the reimbursement from Boulder County attorney cost.
And is that specifically for the airport lawsuit?
Yes, it
And
is.
so I think we should think of that as a one time, or at least during the term of however, or the length of the lawsuit, and once the lawsuit is settled, that will go away?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and, we'll do the same thing with the expense side of it
Yeah.
on the other side.
Are we, because I know we're sharing that cost with Boulder County, I believe it's 50%. Are these numbers our portion of that, or is it 100% and then we'll get reimbursed by them?
We're paying them, so this is what they're reimbursing us. So
Okay.
our budget, and you'll see it here in a couple slides, is 750,000.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
The next page is just a breakdown of the general fund revenues, kind of by percentage of what each of those areas bring in. And then the next one is a breakdown of the taxes piece on how much of that comes from sales and use tax as well as property tax. So you can still see sales and use tax, even though property taxes went up, sales and use taxes are a big, big portion of our budgets.
In addition to Excel, are there any other entities that we charge a franchise fee?
No, other than Comcast. Comcast and Excel are the two we have.
So the commercial waste haulers that are using our streets and to pick up?
They have a licensing fee, but
Okay.
that's not a franchise fee.
Okay.
The way I look at a franchise fee, it's kind of almost to where they're using your right-of-ways to put their systems in.
Okay.
All right, so on the expense side of the general fund, we broke these down by departments and kind of did the biggest expenses of those departments. So 24.7 million in 2025. The legislative branch department is kind of what you guys are. Employee cost 84,000, lobbying expense 21, board special funds 30K. Judicial department, employee cost 70, court judge 36, prosecuting attorney 17. I'm not going to read all these. If you got questions, clerk department 193, big one, admin 2.6 million. Then you see finance and communications.
What's the lobbying fee? What is that?
That's kind of part of, I can't think of the acronym we're in, that pays for lobbying for a lobbyist, our portion of a lobbyist in DC.
What are they lobbying?
I don't know what it is this year, and that may go,
Yeah.
that's what we budget every year. It may not get used. It just
Okay.
depends on what's going on.
Who do I talk to about that? I want to know more.
Probably
I
more.
just want to understand,
Yeah.
what
And I can
what
get a
is
little-
it?
Yeah.
That's okay if you don't know, but I'm like, what is that? So, yeah, I mean, I could see situations where it would be municipality type stuff, but I'm like, but is that? I don't know.
Like grants.
I would think we could be lobbying for particular federal
Yeah, yeah.
legislation that could have a negative impact on Superior, like, we don't want that.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Yep. So you see legal fees, public safety is a big one. Planning and building inspection department. There again, you'll see inspection services 662,000. That's that 53% we talked about. Parks, Rec, and Open Space is 4.4 million. Public Works, 3 million. Non-departmental, 7 million. The biggest piece of that is the transfer to CIP, as well as some of the reimbursements to downtown Superior. We've got budgeted still $305,000 for Marshall Fire rebates, and then community center debt payments of $654K. And then the next page is just kind of a breakdown by percentage of that, $24.7 million. Okay, then the next set of funds we have are capital project funds. Again, we now have two of those. This funds a portion of our capital projects. We've had the 0.3 for quite a while, and that was voted on by the residents. And then in 2024, we added the .315 that was approved that will then got started collecting in 2025. So for the first one, the regular capital improvement program, revenues are budgeted at 7.6 million, 1.6 million for taxes, 1.35 for sales tax, about 120 for building use, and 115 for vehicle use. We've got 2 million for grant revenue. Big portion of that is Rock Creek Parkway pedestrian. That project is about $1.6 million, started in '24, finish in '25. We'll get about $1 million of that back in grant revenue. The GOCO grant was part of Big and Little Sagamore and Children's Park. That's going to be $660K. Comp plan grant, we talked about 150, and then we get that FEMA Sagamore money of 133K. And then you see the two transfers, the one from the Marshall Fire as well as the transfer from the general fund. So that's kind of the revenues for the capital improvement program. Expenses in 2025 are 7.3 million. Big projects for the capital or for the public works, 4.7 million. 2.35 million of that is street replacement program, $1 million for Rock Creek Parkway, and then 625 for their share of the operations buildings. Some of those will change with the new sales tax. They may get moved over to that as we do the bond proceeds to accelerate those. And so this may free up some of this money in 2026 to use for other projects.
Or if projects come in over what we thought they were gonna cost.
Yes.
We bid them out, that could also.
Yep. And then there again, just to remind everybody, capital improvements, if it's a kind of a replacement or an enhancement, that's fine. When we do new things, we got to make sure we have the operation size budgeted. So it's one of those of, okay, maybe we want to do, downtown Superior Civic Space. You'll see that we've got staff budgeted for that. We've got electricity budgeted for that. So it's just one of those when people ring up and say, hey, let's do this. Yeah, we've got the money to do it, but do we have the money to operate it?
So on that question, I don't recall the specifics, but when we discussed the maintenance facility out at the wastewater treatment plant last month, I remember the capital expenditures. Was there a presentation or information on operational dollars that would need to be added as a part of that? Or are we going to see that as part of the 2026 budget?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, parks projects, 1.68 million. Again, their share of that budget or that building. And then the big ones of them, playground improvements and then tree enhancement and care. Admin projects, the civic space, kind of completing that with the 2-year project. And then the comp plan, which will also have the traffic plan. So then we go on to the next fund, which is the other capital project, capital improvement program, which is the new fund for the .315 sales tax. That will be a little different than the other one because the plan is right now, instead of what I would say cash financing projects, we will go out for a bond issue and get bond proceeds of somewhere between $14 and $18 million to accelerate that. And then we'll use that .315 to pay off the debt for those bonds. Now we go to what we call our special revenue funds. And we've got 7 of these. As we talked about, Conservation Trust Fund, that is lottery money. We receive quarterly and only can be used for parks and recreation projects.
I was very disappointed how low that was. People really need to buy more lottery tickets.
And it is funny how it's based on population, so we usually get our piece. But over my years here, you can tell when there's the $1 billion coming, because all of a sudden you'll get an extra, it's only $5,000 for our quarter, but you're like, Oh, yeah, I can pretty much go back for the last 10 years and probably be like, I can pretty much tell the quarter before of when the big ones were actually going on, yeah. Open Space Fund, as we've talked about, that is the 0.3 sales tax used to use for purchases or maintenance after the debt service is paid off. Landscape Fee Fund, same thing, the monthly charge to residential properties within town, used to pay for those enhanced landscaping. Trash and Recycling Fund, that is just a straight pass-through for the subdivisions and areas that the town has the trash service for, so we get billed, and then we pass that bill on to the customers and their utility.
Jeff, I recall when the trash contract was being discussed, I think Neil had asked a question about why we don't charge a small administrative fee, because it still does take staff time to process both ends of that. And wouldn't that then be consistent with some of the other administrative fees that we assess?
We've talked about that. It was brought up a little bit and was like, yeah, we'll wait and do that. What staff has talked about is we may bring that back up when the town, if they take over Rock Creek.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yep. Next one, the Marshall Fire Recovery Fund. Again, that's the 0.16 sales and use tax used for Marshall Fire Recovery. And again, some of that may not directly be Marshall Fire Recovery because we delayed some projects. Street project costs went up, so it's still part of that recovery.
When does that end?
It's a 10-year, so it's
Okay,
2032.
10, okay.
Then the next one is the urban renewal area. That is the tax increment financing, the property tax on top of what it was in 2013 that comes in, that gets divvied out based on the revenue share agreement. Next one, Superior McCaslin Interchange Metropolitan District, as we talked about, that's pretty much the marketplace and Discovery Office Park. Those property taxes used for areas around the, DDI interchange and some of the marketplace areas that we are in control of, including Founder's Park. So now I'll go through these, I did it there. This is more of a breakdown of each one of them. Conservation Trust Fund, again, lottery money, we get about 160K based on allocation of population. This year, we've got 330K budgeted. We had some pool repairs and then the tree enhancements. That may change again with the bond proceeds. We may not do that, but we may move some trees in here or something else, or have more money to do something with, next year. It's not one of those where it's use it or lose it. Next fund, Open Space Fund, again, sales tax, 730K, building and vehicle use tax, as well as interest and lease revenue. The lease revenue is a little bit of revenue we get from two of the cell phone providers that put towers in our open space that we get lease revenue for. And then there you'll see, employee cost, 89,000. The biggest cost is open space maintenance. And then this is what money is left over after the open space bonds are paid off every
Jeff,
year.
what is that open space coordination? What is that?
Kind of like when they do some of the trail walks, some of the other presentations they do, kind of just using that as coordination of explaining people what we do with our open space.
Like programming essentially?
yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Like when we
Gotcha.
did Coyote Ridge, like they, okay.
That makes sense.
Next one, landscape fee. Again, it's the monthly fee. You can see the three different types of fees that there are, and then the breakdown of where that $2.1 million goes. 1.6 is landscape and landscape water. And then the other, big one is the admin fee back to the general fund for all the work that staff does. in that area. Trash and recycle, again, straight pass-through fund. So that's kind of is what it is. That will change a little bit here in April when we go to the pay-as-you-throw, when we go to Republic. So that'll change a little bit, but it's still going to be a straight pass-through of whatever people decide, that's what they will get billed, and that's what will get billed from Republic. Again, Marshall Fire Recovery, based on the sales tax, sales and use tax, and then that's transferred all to the CIP fund. That again will expire at the end of 2032. And again, as we get closer to that, a lot of places will, as we did with this when it was SMID sales tax, it may get repurposed, but that's what we're planning on right now, is it expiring at 2032 and going away. Next one, the urban renewal area. Again, budgeted at $6.8 million, and you can see the breakdown there. Majority of it goes to the developer and the metro districts for their debt payments for the infrastructure that they are putting in over there, as well as some of their operations. Then again, the breakdown of the SMID fund, it's property tax. We do get a payment from CDOT because Brandon and his crew or a contractor are in charge of the upkeep of the traffic signals. And so they pay us back for that. And then that will do some of that signal maintenance. And then we've got budgeted $500,000 for a possible CDOT grant for Marshall and McCaslin intersection improvements. And again, we don't always put grant revenue in, kind of like we've done with the smart meters. Staff knows the only way we're doing these projects is if we get the funding. So, but we want it in there in case it does happen so that they can get going. Again, the expenses on that, Marshall and McCaslin improvements, if we get the CDOT grant, there will be a big project of a mill and overlay for Sycamore and 76th Street. Then there's landscape and watering for the interchange area in Founders Park. And then one of the big ones is transportation costs, including streetlight maintenance, snow removal, street sweeping, signage, and striping. And with that being a state highway, because we get that little bit of money for signal maintenance, we have to keep to their standards. So that's why you'll see in the budget, there's years that our signage and striping is high because they have to meet a reflective percentage on all our striping. So it has to meet standards. Then the next set of funds we have are enterprise funds. Again, these are run like a business, and we have the water, wastewater, sewer, whichever we want to call it, and then the stormwater fund. Each of those will have two budgets when it goes to the council, but it's rolled into one for the end of the year stuff. The thing about these, especially the water fund, before we did the refinancing of the debt in 2016, the general fund, in the way this was set up with the developer and Superior Metropolitan District 1, there's a revenue share agreement. And there's a portion of our sales and use tax that Valerie and her staff allocate every month as a restricted asset, that if the water fund needs it because they don't get enough revenue, we send sales tax money to the water fund. And back in up until probably 2017, there were years it was $1.5 million. And so when we talk about development, and yes, it's system development fees, but it was new connections. Because the water plant was sized to be twice the size of Superior, because what is now open space was supposed to be part of Superior. And so that's a big portion of that, but it's something that as years go on, we've all kind of forgotten about that there was a time we were sending sales tax money. So doing some of the things that we've been able to do, the community center and some of those things, wouldn't have happened 10 years ago because money was going to pay for water debt. So the revenues you can see, a lot of it is monthly charges, and then we get irrigation, and then we get a little bit of the solar panels that are at the water and sewer plants, and then interest income. And again, as we talked about in the earlier portion, expenses, 9
So
point.
Jeff, on this, on the solar, so that's the credit, that's not the net after actual electrical charges are factored in for operating?
Correct, that's actual cash we get from them.
Okay.
Yep.
And what, do you know off the top of your head what our electrical bill is for the plant?
I do not.
Okay.
So again, water supply, these are part of the expenses with Northern Water for our water shares, the Wendy Gap carriers and power that we talked about, CBT. So we have two different water shares. We've got Wendy Gap Water, which is also what we use our reuse from. And then we've got 20,080 units of CBT water. So we have to pay our assessments on both of those. And then there's pipeline cost, as you can see, and pump station costs are, quite large when you come to water supply. Water treatment, biggest portion of there is the plant operator, as well as chemicals to make sure that are all good, and then repairs and maintenance, and then hauling off some of the solids that come out of the water process, and some of those things that, as more federal mandates come down, you will see more capital projects to eliminate some of that or have them dry out a little bit before they're taken off site. Next one, water storage and distribution. One of the bigger lines that keeps getting bigger, it seems like every year, is repair and maintenance of water lines. As our water lines age, and they're not old compared to some places, but as you all know, with the expansive soil, it doesn't take a lot. And so we watch that every year, but it's one of those that we never know when it's going to happen.
I'm curious too, with the increase in large weather changes, is that having an overall impact? I mean, dropping or gaining 40 degrees in a day it happens more frequently, and so is that affecting it as well?
I'm sure it would, it'll just shift the ground. I don't know exactly what, but yeah, that would probably happen as well. Again, water meters, some of those are new for new development, but we still replace water meters that have failed. Excuse me. Then we have electricity cost and then some engineering cost to make sure we have, the right things going on when new development comes in. Then the big portion this year is non-departmental, as I talked about, a big debt payment in this year to pay off our debt that's been around since 2006. So it'll be nice to see that go away. Then the admin fee there, and then insurance. Then on the capital side, what we put in there are system development fees for the connections into the system. And as you may remember from last year's budget, you'll definitely see it this year. As development goes away, that revenue source is drying up very quickly.
That was my question, because I'm assuming those are one-time fees
Those are
for
one-time
development.
fees,
So
yes.
once we're built out, because
Once
that's a
we're
large
built out,
chunk of
those are
it.
gone.
So
And
what do
so
we do to fill the gap there with the revenue?
It's gonna have to be rate, fees, and charges. So rates will have to cover everything.
Okay, oof,
So, yeah.
Barnes and Nobles. We
Yeah.
need to buy a lot of books.
yeah.
What's that?
Buy a lot of books at Barnes and Noble.
Well, but there again, that doesn't help. That's a different pot of money. So realistically, all this is, and some of the prior finance committees have talked about this, where you'll see in a year where our water revenue's down, but our expenses are pretty much flat because they're kind of fixed with what we have with Northern. And they'll be like, well, if we've got lower revenue, expenses should be lower. Because they're like, we want everybody to conserve water, But what you're telling me is if we conserve water, we got to raise rates. So it's a catch-22, because it is. The less water we use to get to the same amount of revenue we need, we're going to have to charge more.
How does decouple that?
I do not know. And that's one of the things that every government talks about. And everybody says, water's cheap, you know, and we're going to end up having to get away from that, unfortunately.
Can we I mean, obviously you don't want to make it a hurdle for development, but can we increase those fees?
We do it every
Knowing that
year.
we're almost built out?
We do it every year. So
Okay.
we did a big rate study when downtown Superior was getting ready to go in and said, all right, here's the rates. And then we froze those rates for 5 years. So I can't remember what the years were, but we said, all right, we'll freeze them for 5 years for you guys. After that, then we go to a CBI index and say, here's the rate every year. Well, if you go back 2 or 3 years ago and inflation was that, there was one year we raised those, it was over 13%. So we've definitely kept up with that. You know, we talked about doing another rate study. We just don't have enough development to make it worth
Yeah.
doing a full rate study to say, here it is.
Okay.
So, yeah, good question.
Maybe we talk about that after the comp plan is completed and we have a better understanding of where development might occur.
Well, there's just not a lot of properties left to say, you know, even if you added 200 homes, if you say, hey, we're going to increase our system development fees by $1,000, you're only talking $200,000.
Yeah.
So you're talking less than the 10%, you know. So, and when you're talking about a rate study would probably cost $50,000 to $70,000,
Yeah.
it's probably not worth it, and that's why we didn't do it.
Well, that's a bummer. I was hoping it wasn't that answer. That was a big
Yeah.
red flag for me. And I was like,
Trust
please
me,
tell me I'm
there have
misunderstanding
been
this.
other finance committee and board members in the past that have said, hey, this doesn't look good in the future. And it's like, yeah, we've got to figure it out. And it's just one of those of talking to everybody else. It's like, what do? You know? But everybody else, there's not a lot that are tapped out. But there again, those are one-time revenues that need to be used for kind of capital improvements and not your ongoing operations. And then down the line, if you need to do a big, you know, new water plant or whatever, I live in Thornton and I've had 2 straight years of over 10% rate increases, and I think there's 2 more coming.
This
So-
question is not for you to answer, it's just more of putting it out there into the universe. Will there come a point in time where we need to consider not having our own wastewater or our own water infrastructure and connect into Broomfield or Louisville and get some economies of scale?
Not for me to answer that. Is something
Right,
for
like I said, I'm just
Brandon.
putting that out
Yep,
there.
yep.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Because I'm assuming the expenses, there's only so much we can do to bring those down, correct?
Yes.
And then we just have to raise rates to meet it.
Yeah, yeah, because I mean, and that's the thing that we've been looking at both at the water side, the sewer side, and the storm side. As all these federal mandates come down for more restrictive standards, it's an unfunded mandate. So here it is, you've got to do this to pass the standard. You know, it's like the PFAS that everybody talks about. I won't say we got lucky, but the only reason we're not worried about it, because 3 years ago, we put the granulated activated carbon, the GAC system in, that we weren't even thinking PFAF, we were thinking Marshall Fire Recovery.
Yeah.
And it's actually been a benefit for something else coming down the line. But yeah, there's places that on that PFAS, some of the larger municipalities are spending tens of millions of dollars to meet the new standards.
And so standards are, which rightfully so, restrict your water use. But even for raising rates and people are restricting their use, our revenues are down, but our expenses aren't going anywhere.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
All right, so expense side, there you'll see the Windy Gap loan allotment contract, 1.46. What we're doing with that, that's sitting in capital now after, and again, these are really one fund. After our debt goes away, that'll get moved into operations. Just kind of a way it's been budgeted for years and the thought process along that way. Again, the smart meters would be 50% grant funded if we can get that grant. There's the other half of the building. And then that, new transmission line, and that's just our portion to upsize it. And that'll give us more redundancy and more water pressure. And that's why we're doing that. The solid facility design, pump station upgrades, and then finalizing the clarificator, one of the big pieces. Don't ask me what it does, but one of the big pieces down at the water plant we'll get finished up here.
Standing in front of this.
Yeah.
I saw that today.
Yeah.
Yes.
So obviously a large portion of that is the contract and the loan funding. Remind me, is that loan going away in 2040? Was that right? Or when does the
Windy Gap
49?
one?
Yeah,
No, that's 2049.
Yeah.
perfect. So obviously we're going to be built out long before then.
Oh, yeah.
Got it. Okay. Perfect.
Yes. Yeah. And again, on the Windy Gap allotment, we're 5.25% of that. Broomfield's a big one. There's some big players in there that, and like I said,
And is that 1.46 fixed?
Nope.
Until,
unfortunately, it goes up. It'll be $2 million here in 2028, I think.
Does that adjust every year? Mm-hmm. Forever until
Well, it's
you
one of
retire the
those,
debt?
they did it as more and more of the Windy Gap. That loan that we did, that additional loan that you guys had to go back and approve, that will then now start getting added on when we draw into that next year. And then there will be new expenses for that reservoir, so that gets funded as well.
And I'm assuming if there is a rate ceiling, it's like 21%, so it doesn't even matter that there's a ceiling.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's one of those that, my predecessor, Paul, has been going to these meetings for 20 years, and when he's in town, he still goes with me because he's one of the voices that they've heard forever.
Yeah.
And people are like, oh, he'll ask the question, he's not afraid. And so it works, and I'm trying to get there, and Andrea, our water attorney, goes that it's one of those that we try to push back, and we've had individual meetings with them. But again, it's being a bigger entity. They just kind of like, here's our costs.
I mean,
we
obviously,
have to-
we're just a portion of it, but is there, because obviously if the debt's not retiring until 2049, can we look at refinancing? Is that something we can suggest?
They will look at that when it comes to, yes.
Okay.
But again, a lot of that debt was issued 4 or 5 years ago.
Is there a prepayment
it's-
penalty on those?
No, but the
Interest rate was pretty
interest rates were so low that, it's,
1.8% or
yeah, I
something.
mean,
Okay.
that's unfortunately part of it as well. So, yeah. All right, on the wastewater side, and you'll hear us talk wastewater and sewer, it's the same thing. Monthly charges, 2.2 million, again, small energy credit, and then interest income. Expenses, collections, line maintenance, again, that isn't as bad as the water because the water lines break because they're pressurized at all times. Those move. What they'll do here is they actually will video these lines to make sure there's no breaks. And then if they see a break, they'll go in and fix it. Water treatment plant, the biggest one of those is the plant operator, electricity, the chemicals, like chemicals for a wastewater plant. Again, they've got to remove everything so that the water's clean when it goes out the other side.
Is the plant operator line, that's for multiple people?
Oh, yeah, that's our
okay.
contractor.
Thanks.
Yeah, that both our operations for the water and sewer plants are contracted out. So yes, that's the contract.
I recall Brandon mentioning that we're looking at going to UV, which will reduce that chemical number.
That's the hope.
That's the hope.
Yes, yep. Yeah, we always look as we do, capital projects. One, it's maybe based on a, mandate that's coming down, but some of them will be, hey, can we reduce electricity costs? I know it, some of them, I think both the plants, they're doing some new pumps that hopefully will reduce electricity costs. Yeah. So.
And as we look at that, are we also looking at more renewable to, again, further bring down that electricity cost?
Yes, I mean, they look at all that when we do projects. It's just the cost benefit analysis,
Right.
of what it looks like. Yep. Then non-departmental, again, most of that is debt as well as the admin fee. Again, one chunk of that will get paid off here in 2025. And then that has its own debt for the debt we did with the state here back in 2020. Sewer capital, again, $1.9 million of system development fees, $3 million in grant revenue. And again, it's already been recorded as revenue. Valerie's got it set up as a kind of restricted cash. So once we spend it, then we'll be able to roll that, but it's kind of already here. We just don't have it in our fund balance right now to be like, hey, this is money you can spend. It's like, no, we know what we're spending this on. So we've kind of segregated it special. Expenses, 3.6 million. Again, the irrigation basin improvements, that's that ARPA money. And then some equalization pond that will help with, removing the sludge and some of the mandates that are coming down the road. And then just some of the other expenses you can see that they do. Then the last enterprise fund is the storm water operations. Again, monthly charges, a little bit of interest income, so not a lot of revenue there, or not a lot of different types of revenue there. Expenses, admin, or the administration, 72,000. MS4 permitted administration, that's the biggest one there. That's to make sure all the new development meets standards, so that will slowly start going down. Keep It Clean program is just to make sure that you keep everything out of your stormwater drainage system. Drainage, again, repairs and maintenance to the reservoir and ponds. Street sweeping is part of that because that's where, anything in the roads ends up in the storm drainage system. Non-departmental, again, the debt payoff, admin fee, and insurance.
The insurance, are these just broken down by the funds on what it's covering in those funds? So, but it is one,
It's one
okay,
big-
like umbrella or
Yes, yep,
policy.
one big policy. Yes.
Do you get feels like multiple?
Unfortunately, after the Marshall fire, no. Well, and that's why we brought, we had to bring the contract back there that first meeting in January because it went up so much. Now, we bid it out and we shouldn't have to, but Matt and I are like, hey, this is big enough. And unfortunately, there's very few people, before or after the fire, the company we're using pulled out of government finance or government insurance. I'm not sure it was all us, but, so there's, 3 or 4 that are even out there. So it really narrows what we can do. So now, again, we could piecemeal everything out. I would need another staff member because I couldn't do it. Yeah. So, and that would just take too much time and effort. So capital side, again, system development fees, $240K next year. Expenses, reservoir and pond maintenance, vehicle replacement. So those are the enterprise funds. And then the last ones we've got are our debt service fund. We've only got one of those, and that's the open space debt service. And again, Sales tax, sales and use tax is the revenue side. The 2015 debt that was refunded will get paid off in 2026. And then that 2020 Coyote Ridge debt will start principal payments in 2027. And that debt payment goes through 2040.
So Jeff, just as another thought for the March 3rd, when you're going through all the debt services that we're making payments on, I think it would also be helpful to share when the payoff date year is, so it's like all front and center. We can say, oh yeah, we've got these 3 debt services that'll be paid off in the next 5 years, and then there's a gap, and then 2040 through 2050.
We've got a graph in 2 slides. Let me see if that answers.
It doesn't quite get at what I'm trying to visualize, but I think it's a good start.
Okay.
Just being really explicit about the year.
So yeah, so there again, we have, 1 debt service fund. And then we have the community center acquisition and improvement loans. Those payments go through 2034 in the general fund. The SMD1 debt gets paid off here in 2025. The sewer loan gets paid off in 2049. And so then on that last page, it kind of shows 2009 forward. Our biggest debt load was after we did the first open space debt, and that was in 2006 at 71.9 million. And at the end of 2025, we'll be at 16.7 million. So that's kind of what I've got for Budget 101.
Jeff, on the previous slide where it had the 3 debts, I'm assuming that's the principal amount that's left and not what the loan was originally, correct?
Just a second, I'm writing down. Councilman, say that now, again, sorry.
Sorry, on this previous slide where it's got the amounts, I'm assuming those are the current principal balances and not what the loan was for originally, is that right?
That is correct.
Okay.
That is the yearly payment for next year. So like the community center, $654,000, that is principal and interest
Okay.
just for 2025.
That's the payment, that's not the
Correct.
balance?
Yes.
Oh, geez.
That's the payment.
Okay. That seemed low. I was
Yeah.
like, wow, we've
Yep.
really paid that down.
Yes. So,
Yeah, right.
More of a broader question. Do we have a practice for an operating reserve? Is it like 5% of general fund revenues or expenses, or is it like a 4-month?
we've got the board, the council, and each one of them has its own. In the general fund, it's 40% is the bottom of that current year's expenditures. That has gone down. It used to be 75 to 100%. Boards in the past have changed that. It went down to 50. Thank goodness it didn't get to 50 before the Marshall Fire, because we were at like 92. We went to like 51 after the Marshall Fire. And this year when we presented the budget to the board, we always make sure we balance it to that number. And we were right at 40%. We'll probably be a little bit under it with the increase in legal costs budgeted. But yes, so we budget every fund to the council directed.
And so general fund is 62 million, or is that the total town?
That's total,
What's the general fund?
about 24 million.
So 40% of 24 is what we would have in reserves in an ideal world.
And there's some of those, there's a formula that's been in there forever. So if it's a revenue, a expense supported by a revenue, it gets pulled out.
Okay.
So there's a little bit of that, but yeah, when you see the budget, and if you look at the budget document in the first section, it'll talk about what the reserve policies are for
Okay.
each fund.
So it's a non-budget neutral expenditures are what we keep in reserve.
Say that again.
The cost recovery. So because I thought I heard you say if there's a revenue and an expense, you pull that out.
Correct, if it's supported. then we
If it's
pull
supported,
those.
okay.
Yeah. Yes.
I just want to, because you kind of explained this already, but somebody's asking about it. I think they sent an email. Brad Walker wanted to know if you could explain the Boulder County attorney reimbursement on page 4 of the Budget 101. You explained it to us about how we pay and then Boulder County reimburse. I think that's what, if you can explain it, so I think he's listening, so he can hear that.
So yeah, it's budgeted on our expense side for 2025. It's budgeted $750,000 with a 50% reimbursement from Boulder County. So the revenue side is $375,000 worth of reimbursement of that attorney cost.
Thanks.
Well, that's all I've got. So unless anybody else has any questions or anything else. Yes, it is.
I did want to ask, because we talked about at the work session about creating something like for community outreach that helps explain some of these things in a, no offense to the finance department, but more like digestible or fun way for the community to really see like how, like we have 14 budgets or 17 budgets and 14 funds. And I think a lot of people that have no experience with this and maybe they're not in that field in the work that they do think it's kind of like our home budget where it's just like one thing and we're managing stuff. And so I don't know if this is the place to discuss some of the ideas for what that would look like, or if we work with like the communications department or, so I'm just bringing it up as I imagine we would have some things in the first quarter to kind of put out to share, and it's February, so we haven't really done anything with it yet. So I'm just thinking out loud about how we can create something, or if people have ideas of what these two people have ideas of like what that looks like.
Yeah, and I'll leave that up to you guys. Again, with a staff of 2, we don't have a lot of time with her doing the audit and everything, but if there's things you can think of that make sense, I know you talked about maybe splitting that dollar, but as you can see, how do we split that dollar? You know, it's one of those of trying to get it down to the, what do you do? Because you can't do that for 17 funds. It's one of those of, do we say, okay, we're going to take $1 and how do you want to spend that in the general fund? But there again, as we went through this, most of the costs are kind of set unless the council says, hey, we want to get rid of a couple staff members or a couple community projects and move that into something else. I mean, we do that every year before it gets to the board with Matt, and last year was tough. I mean, last year was one of those where it's the first time in a while that I sat down with Matt and made some tough decisions of, you know, hey, and then came back with the departments and said, what do you want us to do? And here's what we're thinking about. Here's what we're presenting to the board. And we kind of all agreed with it and went on to you guys. So again, if there's thoughts you guys have, I mean, we've talked about maybe the dollar thing or what are your top priorities? I can work with Valerie and I and, you know, the communication departments can look at putting something together. It's just trying to figure out how, as you said, it's a lot to digest, trying to get that to where people will understand it. And then more importantly, how many people care about it? You know, so it's trying to figure out what works the best to get it out there.
And not making work for work's sake, like, right?
I want to be very cognizant of your guys'
Yeah.
time, because to your point, there's 2 of you
Yeah.
and you've got, you know, other things on your plate as well. So, and it is really tough. I mean, you know, to your point of saying, what are a priority for you? I mean, I want to make sure that sewage is taken care of, that maybe isn't sexy, but
Yeah.
you know, there's certain things that like, you have to take care of them. And so that dollar, when you talk about priorities, I mean, there's probably a very skinny amount that we can actually tweak, because some of that is, you know, this is what you have to do to keep the town running. So, I mean, maybe you've got ideas about that, because I know you looked at like other municipalities and how do we do that in a way that doesn't eat into a ton of your time, because you've got other fish to fry.
Well, and
how
you
to
just,
simplify it.
you know, you gave those things, but what, now that we've gone through this, how do we break that down? Because it's one of those of, we could do it as I did it here, of here's your revenue, here's how it is. But, you know, do we add every personnel cost up there? And then how do you break down a $4 million parks budget of, hey, here's community events or whatever, but who cares about, you know, training and travel and yard waste site and stuff like that, that people have just kind of gotten to be like, oh, I like going to the yard waste site. Are we taking that away? You know, so it's trying to figure out what's the best way to categorize how we want to get it out to the public.
Well, I think it's also part of it is how we present that in a easily digestible way so that we can continue to have public support for what we believe are really important community amenities. And I'm not saying it's easy, because to take something super complex and digest that down into something simple is a very, it's an art for sure. And more than happy to brainstorm ideas or throw ideas on a PowerPoint slide and you can throw them up against the wall and see what sticks. Some of it is also recognizing that maybe trying to present all the details doesn't help, because that just adds more complexity. So how do we look at rolling stuff up to a top level? And that's part of the storytelling that we do. Because I realize in your world where you've got to have 17 different funds and you've got probably 300 spreadsheets that are all connected on the back end, but how do we roll up that information to a top level, to some kind of executive level summary, so that so it's digestible for the community to say, oh, we spend $3 million on trails and we spend $50,000 on this and $100,000 on that.
Yeah, and that's the thing of what's the board want to roll out, and then where are your pieces? Because as I said, an overall budget of 25 in general fund or 60 overall, I don't think doing the 60 would do us any good, because you're, as I say, I call every different fund a different color of money. So we could do it different colors of money, but if you look at, all right, here's the general fund, here's the 25 million, you know, we've got the breakdown of where it's coming from. It's what do we want to show them? How does the council want to show, here's where the 25 million goes? We do it by department, because that's what we know and that's what we have to report to the state and to the, the GFOA that does our budget award. And so that's what we have to do. But if there's a better way to get it out, we're definitely looking at that, but we need some guidance from probably you three and the board to say, how do we roll this up? Because yes, it is, but we got to have the detail, because I can't give you a $25 million budget for the general fund that says it's these 6 lines. You know, so it's one of those of, how do we take that 25 million and those umpteen departments into 10 different items? So yeah, if you've got ideas or we want to sit down and brainstorm it, I'm good with that.
I remember one of the examples that really stood out for me was how Jefferson County does their budgeting. And they've got it down to 6 or 7 lines. And when I sat back and looked at that, I went, wow, this is pretty clear. Does it have all the detail that you just shared with us tonight? Absolutely not, but it's a roll-up of, here are the number of FTEs by type of work, and here are the number of FTEs that they're requesting by type of work. So at least for me, really digestible and say, yeah, I understand what they're asking for in the next budget cycle.
I think we're talking about two different things, actually, from my view on this. Because what I was thinking about from the community outreach piece really wouldn't require much from you two, except to answer some questions sometimes. Like, what you're talking about, I think, is for the board and anyone who's really wants to get into a budget to look at, like, high-level understanding. What I was thinking about for the community is connecting the things they use and the things that they love about our community with how we spend the money. Like, maybe it's a, information on what does it cost to repair a trail, and what do we use to, or this bench for the park that you want replaced, like, this is how much a bench costs, or this is what the playground, and kind of walk that back for them so they can see that this thing I love and use, and I'm asking you to upgrade, or you may be coming to ask me for sales tax increases. If I understand that a roundabout costs this much money, but a stop sign costs this much money, like those kinds of things, I think for the community who may or may not care about the whole budget might just be interested to know, like, when I say put a roundabout in, what I'm saying is this $2.5 million project. It's not as simple as, so for me, it was more of awareness to inform people of simply how much it costs to put a new bench in, or to put in a bathroom at a park, or, and those could be things we do maybe, once in the Sentinel that goes out as like a one page of like a picture of a bench and like, visuals walking it back to where does that money come from? Like, how does it get paid for? And then explain, where it comes from. So I think less going into the weeds of, breaking down the dollar, and more of the everyday items they use and experience in the town that they may not even realize, kind of a thank you of like, yes, they have to pay taxes, but thank you, because this is what this money does for our community and these things that you love. And I think that would be fun and require very little from you guys, right? Because the information's already there. It might just be a campaign of how do we promote, the value in our parks, and explain what it entails to go through the process of picking a vendor to put in a new piece of park equipment. Like, people don't realize that how much it costs for those. And so that's kind of more what I was thinking of. And I think Mike and I are just thinking of different, it's same, but different kind of avenues. And I think more work with some of the town staff, like have Brennan out on a street corner explaining, like, this is $2.5 million. This is only $1 million, or, what we've done to the street, because that little awareness is like, you can only keep people's attention for so long, and just a little snapshot of like, oh, I didn't know it cost that much money. I think that will go a long way with people to have more trust and understanding, like, how we're spending the money too. Yeah, I think that's it.
I like that a lot, actually, because I think this Budget 101 does a pretty good job of, if people want to get into the weeds, like, there are a ton of different funds and buckets, and there is a reason, and I think this does a pretty good job of explaining what that is for anybody who wants to get in the weeds. But it's human nature. At the end of the day, we all want to know what's in it for me, and to Jen's point, I think I was shocked when I got on the board and I found out how much things cost. I was like, oh my God. So when people are like, this intersection is dangerous, throw in a stoplight. I'm like, do you have any idea how much a stoplight is, or how much a roundabout is? And, it's things that need to get paid for and things that need to get done. So I'm not saying like it's expensive, let's not do it. But it would be important, I think, and very impactful for the residents to know how much that is. Even something as simple as a bench. I mean, things are just a fortune. And so having an understanding like this, I think, is great for if you want to get into the weeds and figure out how the budget works. But just from a practical standpoint, to keep the 15 seconds of attention you really get from people, in general, I love the idea of like a one page, if you want this or if you want that, or this is how much this costs. I also see the, FTEs and all of that is valuable, but I also am a little nervous that people will be like, well, just cut staff. And it's like, well, this is what the staff provides. So if you cut that, then you're going to, then you're going to be pretty upset when suddenly the service levels go down. And, it's easy to say, well, cut staff or cut this or cut that. But, I think just being able to see how much things cost. And, to Jen's point, I think that would take very little from staff's time, because again, I'm trying to be very cognizant of where you
Sabrina.
spend.
Well, I think the
Yeah.
biggest piece there is what does the board want to put out there?
Yeah,
You know, because it's one of those of what we as staff, and especially the people that are in it every day, may have something completely different idea of what the council wants.
yeah,
So maybe it's one of those at March 3rd, if you guys want to start and say, here are the things we'd like to see, and then, you know, I can get with communications and Brandon and Leslie and say, all right, and then we do a quick little thing, and maybe we bring it back to you guys at the next, you know, finance committee meeting, because it's one of those, you know, at least this is what Matt's always said, and what we try to do is, I don't want to just rush something to put it out there. Let's think it through. Maybe that doesn't mean it goes out this year before the budget, but here it is, and we start building something that, all right, this makes sense, we'll send it out, and then we just build on it every year.
yeah. Because, you know, I think very few are going to want to get into the weeds on this. I think some will, and I think it's great that they do, because people should know where their money's going and how it's spent and how it's allocated. And we can talk about it as a council. But I think, you know, giving kind of the broad strokes of this is how much things cost, this is where your money's going, and this is how much things cost. And if you want to learn more, here's a link to the website that can then take you to this presentation and kind of dig down a little bit more. But I don't think most people are going to have the attention for a 40-page. You know, I think it's fantastic, but most people are probably not going to have the attention span for it. So the people that do, awesome, it's available. But just kind of more of a high level, this is how much things cost and where your money's going.
The Price is Right, was that shopping one? It's like, what's the price of a signal?
I think it could be a fun.
How much money do
Yeah.
we spend
Right.
on pool chemicals each summer? Like, they would be I think they would be shocked at the cost. I think that would be helpful for.
And that's one of those, as you say, pool chemicals, it's one that never would have crossed my mind to go out and say, hey, here's what it costs for your pools.
Yeah.
So it's one of those of brainstorming with the departments and
yeah.
with the council to say, what do we want to put out there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
If
so,
the pool's open all summer long, this is what it costs.
Yeah.
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 And if the residents are like, that's way too much, all right, then we'll reduce the number of hours.
They
No, it would not.
They,
it would not.
they, what I think it's going to do is potentially curb some of the random, like, I want this, I want that, because some awareness of the cost. Like, you can have those things, but know what they cost and have an understanding of like what you're asking for, because sometimes people aren't involved in this side of it. Just think of things to like, just fix this. Like, that's okay. How do you want us to pay for that? But also don't vote for a, you know, like, thankfully they did vote for
Yeah.
the sales tax. So,
Yeah.
that was great. So I think they're receptive to, this kind of thing, and we can have some fun with it. It doesn't have to, I want to say, like, just being very, conscious of the burden on already overworked staff.
Yeah.
And so in my mind, this never was about you guys creating something. It was our wild harebrained ideas. And so I feel like when we have those, we should
well, yeah. and-
take ownership of it.
And as you said, if there's
Yeah.
different things that we know, you know, Brandon or Leslie have, and we can pull it together, and then we can have comms help us to say, here, we can put this on one sheet. Yeah, the more information we can get out, the better. You know, it's just getting out what the council wants,
Yeah.
you know, and because
We can work on that.
everybody's different. You know, it's one of those of what I think and what Valerie thinks they want to know may not be what you guys, because you're, you know, in the community every day.
Yeah.
So,
You know, it'd be super fun, because you're talking about the Price is Right, and I'm trying to think of like engaging people so they actually read it and pay attention, is doing a one-pager about, and like things that are common, like streetlights, and then, like, this is a terrible example, so not, but I didn't think of it until the wastewater treatment tour, which was fascinating. Like solids Holloway. I didn't know that was a thing. Like, wow. So, you know, that's a terrible example.
Or the
too.
bugs that they have to break.
Or the bugs,
like,
that was so cool.
People
So,
don't know
like,
this stuff.
Having some like common things, and then like maybe one or two little like, I had no idea that was even a thing. and something that's necessary, but having those with a multiple choice of like 1, 2, or 3, what do you think this costs? And then, people can submit their answers, and whoever gets the most, like top like 3 gets like a gift card to local businesses. But
Marketing brains up
yeah,
here.
and then like the next, edition, then you learn, who won and what the correct answers were. But I think that could be an engaging way to get people to be like, oh, this is how much things cost. So, I don't know, just an idea. That could be fun.
Yeah, we can think about it more. and-
Us,
Just like, okay.
not put onto you.
Yeah.
No, but again, it's, yeah.
We'll brainstorm that.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. Anything else?
No,
Thank you for
very much.
this.
Thank you.
Really appreciate your time tonight.
Yeah. So I think with
Actually,
that,
I do have a question, because I'm new to the finance committee, and I think both of you are too.
Yeah.
So, did we miss things? Like,
no,
are there
again,
things that we're like, wow, they didn't ask about that?
No, it's one of those of, like I said, when I go through the quarterly report, it's how much detail you guys want to get into, kind of like what we're talking about the budget. The information's there, it goes on the website every month. You guys can see it. If you got questions, we're always open to answer them. I've had some trustees in the past couple of years that come in and kind of ask the questions you guys asked of, hey, where's this going? And I'm always up to doing that for any of the council members of going that way, because until you see a 40-page document of, oh, yeah, there are 17 funds that you guys are really in charge of, that it kind of opens your eyes of, oh, that one little dollar gets split different ways. And then, oh, wait, when I send in my water bill, that's paying for 5 different things. It's paying for my trash, it's paying for my water, my sewer, my storm, and my landscape. Well, for us, that's 5 different funds, that you pay in one auto draft out of your thing that nobody even thinks about. And nobody thinks about when they flush the toilet or turn on the water faucet, that, it's safe and clean to drink. And, so yeah, but yeah, definitely. No, I don't think you missed anything. But again, as you go through these or the monthly stuff, if you've got questions, we're always willing to, sit down or have a quick email or phone call if you need it.
Well, thank you for putting this together, because I know that budgeting at this level is very different than the budgeting I've ever dealt with. And so I found it extremely helpful to really break it all down.
And again, if there's other things that you can think of that would improve it for the 3rd, shoot them our way and we can, put a few more things in there. Or take some things out if they need to come out.
Yeah,
So,
thank you.
Yeah.
The more I do this work, the more I can't believe that just anybody can be elected and do this stuff sometimes. So I appreciate you both being the experts in the field and navigating us, so thanks.
thank you. All right, I think with that, we're adjourned.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.